We're officially live on the B2B Community Builder Show. Did that just wake you up, dude? You good? Season 5, episode 178. I am your chief executive connector and host, Pablo Gonzalez. And today on the show, we're talking about a topic that I'm super pumped to talk about with a guy that I am super pumped to share the stage with. He burst onto my radar when his lightning strike went viral in my eyes. It was a beautiful execution. He is a pitch artist. He is a ringside announcer, our chief pitch artist at Startup Hype Man, helps you with elevator pitches, creative content execution, pitch strategy, all around cool guy. Rajiv, Nathan, Raj Nation, welcome to the show, my man. Welcome to the B2B Community Builder.
Love the hyped up introduction. You're doing my job and giving me the hype. So I appreciate it.
I think the first time you and I spoke, I said that even hype men need hype men at some point.
This is true. This is true. I totally forgot that how we met was through that Carl video. It didn't occur to me that is how we met, but yeah.
Legit. I mean, it's just one way I meet. Usually I see something that I really admire in someone and I reach out and I tell them how much I like them. So similar technique, different execution. I want to welcome our community. We already got folks lined up in here. Love having you. Rowan, this is what we call the roll call, Raj. Rowan is already welcoming everybody. She's our community manager on the show. Let her know in the chat if you need anything, if you need contact info on Raj, anything that's happening, anything that you're referencing. I want you to be a part of it. We got Gareth Babalé, my British friend from Miami, or at least we met in Miami in high school. Now he's back in the motherland. We got Brett Ruiz, a blue collar founder, I think is the way that I'm going to start calling him. He's a design builder going into tech, which I think is.
And I met Brett through you.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right. You met him in Chicago.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. We could talk about that later. I love that. We got Lee Bishop, who's the MVP of the Not Your Average Investor Show community, and now an esteemed member of our community here. We got Cassidy Smith. Cassidy, welcome to the show from Chicago. I assume that's one of your friends. Good to have you here. We got Julie Eason, the category queen of ghostwriting. She was the ghostwriter for Russell Brunson's first 2 books, FYI, no big deal. We got Douglas Lehman. What it do in layman's terms. I like that, Douglas.
Layman, right? Like layman's terms.
Layman's.
Right?
That's what happens, which is my second language. Layman's terms, my man. We got Jen Filson, who is the fairy godmother of the Not Your Average Investor Show community. Also a big part of our team over here and what we do. And we got Ryan Anderson, also from the UK. Ryan is a guy I just connected to who is pushing you for the title of Weird Al Yankovic of LinkedIn. Ryan's executing some cool stuff, man. You guys should connect. Nice. We got Bob Habian. He is new to the show from Rockland, California. Love that. Building architect and founder, CEO at tech.com. Love that, Bob. Can't wait to hear more about that. Let's kick this off, man. I love to start off with why are we here and what's important, Raj, right? Like, tell me why people need to understand the impact of a well-executed content lightning strike, and then we're going to get into what it is and blah, blah, blah. But what is so important about the value of knowing how to do one of these things?
Well, I mean, let's look at content overall, whether it's a lightning strike or just a general content strategy. This is ultimately like, what people refer to as the air coverage for your business. Like, this is how people are going to find out about you. This is how they're going to know about you and start to trust you and help you develop some type of like presence and thought leadership and expertise in front of your market, whether it's through videos, through the written word, through audio, right? All of these are different ways that let your audience know that you're here, that you've got something for them, and that they might be able to learn a thing or two out of you or get some value out of you, whether it is through education, entertainment, laughter, which is entertainment, right? Or a combination of those things. And then, so I think that's the importance of content overall. But then this idea of like the lightning strike, right? Which is that moment that I feel like, if you think about that phrase, right? The moment that makes people stop in their tracks, right? Like they just got hit with a bolt of lightning. I think it's a great way for companies to go big, even if you don't have, the budget to pull off like Dreamforce, right? like Salesforce does, or you don't have the ability to run a Super Bowl commercial like Gong does. I think there's a lot you can do at a very base, like low technology, low investment level, just by creating content that gets people to turn their heads. And that's like, you're calling it lightning strike, which I think is a great phrase. The way I like to look at this is I call it can't sleep content. And what I mean is, how do you create something that is so good or interesting or different or valuable, right? Like insert adjective, but how do you create something that is so that thing that it makes some, like that person who consumes it can't go to sleep that night until they have told someone else about it. Right. And like, and like, let's just think about this, not from like a B2B angle for a second. Just think about, if anyone here, like if you're a sports fan, like think about Steph Curry, like drains like a half court three, or, Jason Tatum has a sick dunk in the paint.
Too soon, bro.
You watch. All right, Jimmy Butler. No. Right. So like you have this insane sports highlight, and then like maybe you see it on ESPN or whatever app, but then you see it and you can't help but text the link to that to like 3 of your friends, right? When what's happened is you've consumed something and something in you says, I can't even go to sleep tonight, right? Whether it's daytime or nighttime, you're like, I can't do the next thing in my life until I share this with other people. And so it happens in sports highlights. It happens with news clippings, but you can create content that has the same impact on people itself, on people themselves.
Love that, man. And I want to deconstruct a couple of things before we get into talking about how to do this yourself. You mentioned something that I find that's right at the crux of why I'm so pumped to do this call. And it's the affordability of it, right? Like the term lightning strike, I borrow it from Play Bigger, right? Like the category design guys, a lightning strike is a giant splash where everybody knows that you exist and the problem that you solve, and kind of like get you onto their plane of awareness. And before the proliferation of a B2B social media engine such as LinkedIn, a lightning strike for a B2B kind of business or for a software or whatever had to be a Super Bowl commercial or a giant event, or even like the coolest event at a conference. That was the way that kind of Salesforce started doing it. But there's now this like really unique opportunity to, or, whatever, you get a front page ad in the front page of the Wall Street Journal or whatever, right? Like everything had a gatekeeper that had something to do with elevated cost structure. And I think we're in this unique period of time where LinkedIn is at scale. There still isn't people that are, there's still like, I think the last stat I read is something like only 3% of LinkedIn users actually make content for LinkedIn. And therefore, a really well orchestrated organic piece of content that could take you 2 months to figure out, but really only cost you like 2 G's or less, and become this one thing that goes ham and isn't, I don't know if the term is viral or not, but you can engineer this way for your entire ecosystem to get to know you at a fraction of the cost of what that used to take. And that to me is like the giant value of what you did with Carl, at least, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So like, I think we should find out here in the chat if people are familiar with that video, and that'll help me describe it or whatever. But, or maybe you could even, maybe now would now be a good time to pull it up in the screen share.
You know what I would like to do is I would like to describe it, because this is going to be for the podcast audience. What I do promise you, community friends, right now is that at the end of this call, Raj is going to go teach a yoga class and I'm going to play the video and you're going to be like, oh my God, I get it. So we're going to do that before we get into the relationship driven growth strategy sessions that we do after this, which I invite you all as the office hours kind of stuff where everybody networks and we give advice. We got a couple interesting things to talk about, but we're going to show it. But for now, why don't you describe it? Tell me what you did. You know what? I'm going to describe what you did, and then you tell me where I get wrong.
Sure,
right?
sure.
If anybody is familiar with the Eminem song "Stan," where it's like "Man, you know, worry about me," about like this like fan that
was an interesting mock rendition.
right? It's like the frou-frou sample, or right? It was a frou-frou.
It's Dido.
Dido.
Dido, right? It
All right.
reminds me that it's not so bad. It's not so bad.
There you go. So the Eminem song is of this like fan that writes Eminem a letter because he saw him at a show and it told him that he was going to be his fan, and starts losing his mind slowly but surely. What Raj did was take that song and write a parody of a sales rep, an SDR in the software world, that is trying to reach a prospect and isn't getting a response back, and he's losing his mind more and more, and he just completely freaking nails it. Of the feeling of the song that is super dark, yet he keeps it really, really entertaining and very like germane to the feeling of somebody that isn't getting a call back and you're just losing your shit, and rhymes it perfectly, keeps the cadence of the song, and then filmed a music video to it and dropped it on LinkedIn. What am I missing there? Is that accurate?
I think that's a pretty good overview. Yeah. Because you take instead of Eminem's version was a fan obsessed with Eminem trying to like meet him and never getting, a letter back or a call back. And this is the SDR named Carl, because it kind of rhymes with SDR, just trying to get like book a meeting with their favorite prospect and never hearing back through all the emails and the calls and all the multi-touch strategies that are taught to salespeople. And, it was super fun to write and record and make. Actually, this office was the scene of it made it into a couple of the scenes in the final music video, but it was an anthem, right? It was something that people could relate to, and it resonated with them. And I think what's interesting is this was like Stan, the original song is like 6.5 minutes long. It's a long song, right? So I'm doing a parody off that. I'm also doing a 6.5 minute song. That's a long time. And so there's a couple of things that I think are important to note with this, right? It's really hard to keep someone's attention for 6 seconds or 60 seconds, let alone 6+ minutes. So when I'm making this, first just writing the lyrics, I'm thinking to myself, well, how do I just make sure this stays so tuned in to what that audience of salespeople is going to relate to? Like from like every single line, how can it be like relevant to them? What you will see is that it's a 6.5 minute song and video, but it's not 6.5 minutes talking about Startup Hype Man, right? It's not, oh, hey, we can help you with your sales pitch. We can help you with your VC pitch, any of that stuff. It's just a 6.5 minute video that entirely focuses on the life of the SDR and all the BS that they have to go through, and just makes light of a situation that they face every single day. And when you create this idea of the lightning strike content, it's really got to be something that your audience can relate to. And newsflash, your audience cannot relate to your product, right? They cannot relate to your offering. What they can relate to is the struggles that they go through. What they can relate to is their own situation. So it's funny because how we think about creating a pitch for companies is the exact same way I think about creating content, which is make it relatable and be able to like be the voice or the heartbeat of what's going on in their mind.
I love that, man. And to kick it back to something that you said earlier on the call, educate, entertain, I would add inspire, right? Like the three kind of like content that has the ability to really connect with your audience. It can educate, entertain, and inspire. But to your point, it only becomes a lightning strike piece of content if it gets their attention and they share it. And what you're describing is essentially the idea that it's not going to work if what you're doing is educating them about you. You're essentially giving them a certain feeling that allows them to feel like you understand them. You have a unique insight into their life. You're holding up a mirror to them while entertaining them or inspiring them or doing something. In this case, it was incredibly, incredibly entertaining. And I'd love to hear what the effects of this thing were, right? Like, I know that we shot a pre-frame for this thing, but like, I don't think everybody watched that. So what was the effect of this thing? 6-minute video of you playing Eminem in a song on LinkedIn. What were the business outcomes in your regard?
Yeah, here, let me pull this up here because I've got a whole thing here, right? So like 15,000 minutes this thing was watched. Okay. And that was just over the first, like, I think 3 weeks. So there's even been long tail effect after that, but 15,000 minutes this was watched in 3 or 4 weeks, almost 14,000 views. And then I think of the unique viewers of that was like nearly 13,000. And that, again, over the first few weeks, 536 reactions, 394 comments, 54 reshares. And that's just pressing the button of reshare. That doesn't even count the untraceable stuff of someone copying the link and texting it to a friend, or the number of people who put in the comments, "This was great. We showed it to our team at our weekly stand-up," right? Or, "Hey, I just emailed the link to this to my boss and like 9 of our team members," right? So those are like the untrackable things within a platform like LinkedIn. But to come back to this whole idea, like, you set this thing up for success by making it relatable. And, the lyrics that are in this were all very intentional, right? It's like, "Dear prospect, I wrote you, but you still ain't calling. I left my cell, office, and my social at the bottom." Like, think about an email signature. And then it's like, "I sent 2 letters back in autumn. You must not have got them. There probably was a problem with the spam filter or something," right? These are things that you think about as you're trying to send emails and not getting responses. And then you can start to like extrapolate it more and more from there as the song progresses. But like, towards the end of that first verse, the Carl is like, I got browser tabs pulled open full of your info, man. I liked your latest blog post too. Yeah, that shit was fat, right? So you kind of like, you mirror the original song, but then you make it something that is highly relevant to the specific situation. And because the song itself resonates, that's step one. But if it's a longer song like this, so, a lot of times I'll do these music videos they're just like, like one take in the booth videos, if you will, which definitely work really well. So like my first lightning strike, if you will, was like 4 years ago. Yeah, I think it was like 4 years ago, late 2018. I remixed the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air theme song, and I made it, a promo song for Startup Hype Man. But again, it wasn't, that song is, I think, 75 seconds long or 70 seconds long, so way shorter. But it's not until 45 or 50 seconds in that Startup Hype Man is ever even mentioned, right? The first 45, 50 seconds of that is all just relating to where that customer might be today, and then drawing it towards what our solution is and how we help. But in like a 70-second video, like I can get away with I call it intentionally lo-fi, right? So it's literally my cell phone on a tripod. And I think, if I recall, like literally it was, you don't see this bookshelf in the Fresh Prince of SAS video, but this bookshelf is what's propping up the cell phone on the other side of the screen in that video. And I just kind of like literally like, I positioned it a certain way where like the different props on here were literally like holding the phone in place. Like it very, very lo-fi setup. Yeah. It was a one take continuous shoot video. And I even think if you watch it, it's actually slightly like angled down and to the left. So I didn't even put like that intentionality behind it. But I didn't have to be grandiose with the production because it's a short song. And it's, again, like when it's short, you don't have to have great production value. And I would even make the case that if it is short, you've either got to make a decision for it to be intentionally lo-fi or be something that's well produced. If it's in the middle ground, then it just gets looked at more for what it's lacking than for what it is. Now with Carl, 6.5-minute video, people would not stick around if it was 6.5 minutes of a continuous cell phone shoot of me just going through the lyrics, right? Like rapping the song for 6.5 minutes. People aren't going to watch that. So I knew I had to take it a step up for that. And that's where I pulled a production team together and shot it as an actual music video. So you're keeping people's attention through that 6.5 minutes because the scene is changing every few seconds, right? Like, there's probably 15 different, all of it happened literally within one block of this building that I'm in and the different, aspects of this floor of this building. Yeah. But there's probably 15 different scenes within that. And so for something that's longer, it's got to be better produced.
Got it. That makes sense. And all right, so now we've kind of distilled 2 lessons. Number 1 is it can't be about you. It has to be about the person watching it and making it relatable and entertaining or inspiring and educational. And then the idea that the shorter it is, the less you have to worry about production. The longer it is, the more that you have to think about the brain and keeping their attention and things of that sort, right? Like I can think of a couple of different scenes of Carl, right? Like you are on the street, you are like in a bathroom where you're just like washing your face, trying to get back to work, yelling at the mirror.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're here, it's a couple of different things, and breaking up the different scenes makes sense. We're talking a lot right now on technical execution. I would love to kind of zoom out a little bit, right? You also referenced this idea that you did the Fresh Prince song. You get hired to do these like hip hop jingles / content lightning strikes for different SaaS companies. And I would love anybody that's here, if you have a Q&A about how, like an idea that you have, if it would make sense, put it in the Q&A, or if you have any kind of like clarification question, would love to bring it up and talk about that. In the meantime, Raj, what I would love to talk about is the idea that, you know, I try to orchestrate a content lightning strike at one point, which was my last call, my 2019 last call, right? Like I did this like rapping and talking origin story of my business, and I released it as a podcast. Later on, I had a buddy animate the rapping piece of it.
Cool.
It did pretty well. Like it did okay for me when I released it. But I feel like what you do, there is a little bit more strategy to the way that you distributed Carl, which ensured for like a more widespread distribution and like enhanced virality. You want to talk a little bit about what to think about, you know, if you are already a creative genius like Raj, or you're hiring a creative genius like Raj and you know how to make it, you know, what goes into the prep before you drop it and the distribution after the fact?
So this very, very like non-technical formula I came up with: successful content equals interesting content plus intentional distribution. Interesting content plus intentional distribution. And I think a lot of companies forget about the second part of that, which is the intentional distribution. I think this applies to like all aspects of business, but definitely content. Like hope is not a strategy. You know, a music artist doesn't really make a song and hope it gets discovered. A director doesn't make a movie and hope people know that they should watch it, right? And so, you know, with a video like Carl, I could not just assume people would, I couldn't just be like, I hope people find this, right? And I think a younger me, maybe it would have done that, not realizing like the associated game you have to like play around the content itself. But that intentional distribution is so important. And like in this case, my distribution platform of choice was LinkedIn. And when you think about LinkedIn as a platform, like the goal of that algorithm, you know, no one really knows how the algorithm truly works at a mechanical level. But what we do know is that when you post something, only a fraction of your network sees it. And then it's looking to see, is this interesting based on likes and comments? And if we can deem it interesting based on those factors, we're going to start showing this to more and more people. And then those people who comment and stuff, it's going to start appearing in their feeds and their networks and stuff. So I think like ultimately the algorithm's goal is to fill news feeds with the cream of the crop. So you have to make yourself the cream of the crop, not just from the content creation, but from the distribution. So what I feel like how people drop off on that second part of the intentional distribution is they do this like post and ghost, meaning like they put it up online and they just sit back and like wait. And they're like, okay, let's see the likes start pouring in. And this is especially a backfiring approach if you don't already have an active presence on the platform. So think about your own content right now, or your own profile right now, rather. If you don't have an active profile in terms of, you know, stuff you post on a semi-regular basis, you've trained the algorithm to say, my content, like I'm not a profile that creates things. So now the algorithm at baseline is not really working in your favor. So you've got to go into this having warmed up your audience, if you will, in a certain capacity, have some type of posting cadence, right? You know, your first several posts probably won't get much traction. Nothing's a guarantee, right? There's always the anomaly where someone's first post blows up somehow. But you want to have a warmed up profile, if you will, that already shows regular activity so that at baseline, this, overbearing algorithm, right? The matrix, so that the matrix knows that your profile is already something that's worth featuring, or your content is worth featuring. But then on top of that, where you seed your virality, if you will, when I publish Carl, or even when I publish Fresh Prince of Sass, the second I press publish, I've got another browser tab pulled up with my MailChimp. And I had a pre-written email to go out to my email list. And again, I wrote the email before, but I can't put the URL until the LinkedIn post is live. So the email's ready to go. I just got to push publish on the LinkedIn post, grab that URL, drop it into that MailChimp newsletter, and then hit send on that. So within a minute, now an email is going out to I think it was 3,000 people at the time, letting them know, hey, there's this content and I think you're going to like it. So go here and watch it. But on top of that, what I also did was send a separate email to, if I'm going back on what I logged here, it was 79 people in my network, total arbitrary number, somewhere between 30, 70, 100 people is fine. But I sent a separate email just out of my own Gmail, right? My company email, but on the G Suite platform, to people who I know are probably not on my email list, but are ecosystem partners, people that I've connected with in some other Pablo, if we had known each other at that point, you would have been in that separate distribution email. That's, it's me writing a personal email, and everyone's BCC'd. It's just a single email. I'm not writing it 79 times, but I'm basically hey, would love your support on this thing. Just release it. I think you're going to get a good laugh. I think you're going to love it. Would love it if you could go watch it. And if you're inspired to, go ahead and like it and leave a comment on it.
I would hope to make that list, for the record.
Yeah, forward. I mean, for future ones, you will, right? So these are the things that were intentional with the distribution. I didn't just push it online and sit back and be all right, let's see what happens here. If I did, I'd have a chance of some success because I was already an active profile, but I don't think it would have scaled up as much as it did.
Yeah.
But because of this strategy, within the first hour, 2 hours of it being live, tons of traffic is going to that video, and people are watching it and they're liking it and they're commenting on it, and then they're sharing it with others. And then that viral coefficient, if you will, starts to take off from there.
Yeah. Love that, man. Love that. So the 3 points, we got a bunch of Q&A, man. So I'm going to dive into the Q&A right now, and then we can continue the conversation. I love Q&A. Thank you. Thank you for contributing, community. The 3 points that you brought up that I think are great. One, start flexing the muscle of posting a little bit ahead of time, right? If it's your first time ever posting on LinkedIn, CEO guy that hired somebody to do it for them before, right? It's not going to go as well as if you just started showing up maybe 2-3 weeks prior, or even if you are somebody that's man, I got this great idea. I'm working on creating this concept. Just start right now, going on LinkedIn, engaging a little bit more often than you were before as you are creating this thing, to train the algorithm that you're a real person and that you like to show up.
Yeah.
To, have your email list, the people that you normally distribute to, have something ready for them. And then also have your own personal network of people that care about you, somewhat primed, somewhat ready to go. Me as a regular person, I've never done I have yet to push it all the way out to my entire email list, something that I do. But I know that when I really like something I'm writing, I will text, a couple of people here or there, right? The people that I'm friends with from Peak Community that I'm on a text with. I got a couple of other people from another community that I'm on LinkedIn with, and I'll just DM it to them, and I'll just be hey, I'm really proud of this one, or would love your thoughts on this, right? But that multi-strategy of I just made this thing, go check it out. It's for you. On an organic level, gets people going. What about the idea of tagging people? Do you believe in tagging people for something like that? Or is that too small of thinking for what is an actual lightning strike?
You can, depending on people's settings, it may reach them or not. I know I get tagged and stuff sometimes, but I don't actually see it until 5 days later for whatever reason. I don't know why, but there's a big lag. You can. I wouldn't load your comments with a bunch of tags of people, because then I believe, I don't have proof of this, I believe it starts to work against you in a way, because your post appears more like spam to the algorithm.
Mhm.
A couple other things, like hashtags don't really matter. And I'm speaking specific to LinkedIn here, so I don't want to mince that. Hashtags don't really matter. And that's like what LinkedIn's editing team has said. Like, maximum 3 is probably a good, like, guide to be around. Adding 9 hashtags doesn't do more for you. And to be honest, it really only matters more if it's an already like trending topic. And what I think is interesting is LinkedIn now tells you in the top right corner of the platform, like, here's trending news stories right now. So if it aligns with something that or similar to that, I think you've got a shot. But I wouldn't put in too much stock in having the right or the perfect hashtags, or really any hashtags. I think for me, like, I wanted it to be searchable later on. So even for my own sake, I can type in hashtag Carl, and I believe it should show up within the search bar. And then so all those points you recap, and then within that, right, what we're saying is that content formula is interesting content plus intentional distribution. Rather than post and ghost, you post and push, right? You push it on, or you push it into the market by doing that intentional distribution.
Got it. All right, cool, man. Let's dive into some Q&A right now. So Lee Bishop, MVP of the Not Your Average Best Show community, says, does the LinkedIn content keep the same stats as Zoom? Does it keep the stat that each play went all the way through it? You talked a little bit about like watch time, right? Where are you getting those stats from?
They've actually updated it. And when this released, it was actually less analytics than I believe videos do have now. So what I can tell you is that I'm literally looking at the screenshot I took back, last year. It was showing me total minutes this video has been watched, including sponsored and organic distribution. It shows me number of times this video was watched. And then it also shows me number of unique people who watched this video. It doesn't show me the exact amount of time that they watched it for, but there's enough evidence based on the other activity to say they were watching the entire thing, if not, or probably the entire thing, or at least a lot of it. Mm-hmm. Another thing that I look for, just from like an anecdotal stat, again, is what are people saying in the comments? And you had people literally in the comments. Let me go back here. I've got it pulled up. Side note, someone's comment. This is officially the first long form LinkedIn video I've ever watched all the way through twice in a row. Right. So people are literally saying that. And then someone else, dude, this was amazing. And then that person tagged someone else saying, let's show this at morning stand up tomorrow. So, right. People will let you know if it's not in the exact analytics. People will let you know by how they comment on it, how it's resonating with them.
We're going to go through the Q&A. I want to bring up the fact that we're also going to talk about with Raj how he followed up with it, right? Like, you had this outstanding support. It ended up leading to revenue, right? And I know that you ended up reaching out to people and it built your pipeline. So I want to get into that. I don't want to lose people before we get there, but let's get through the Q&A right now. We've got 8 questions in the Q&A. I think this is a B2B community builder show record right now. So this is awesome. You're all a part of it. Thank you. Julie Eason writes, this is fun, but there's no way I'm going to sing. Would a voiceover with me lip syncing be a good compromise?
So great question, Julie. And I did want to touch on this. So thank you for asking it. You could totally get someone else to like create a song, and then you're just like part of that video, right? Maybe you and your team like are the actors in the video. Doesn't have to be the person mouthing it the entire way through. And that's something that happens a lot with the content that I'll help produce with Sales Feed. For those who don't know, is this a sales media network? Roughly once a month at this point, they're collaborating with me on a music video for salespeople. And so those videos, we're starting to involve other people in them, where it's not just a straight video of me, but it's people like kind of contributing their own like user developed content. Like they'll get the song and they'll be like, hey, can you just record like a 10-second video of you doing the hook of this song? Or even just like the action that is being, talked about in the lyrics of this song. And then what's cool in that respect is now it becomes co-created. So each person now is more invested to distribute it themselves because they were part of the actual content itself. But everything that I'm saying here does not just apply to creating like music videos. So I just want to be really clear about that. Music video is an execution of this entire thing. but I've had success writing what would you call it? Like an ebook, right? Where the article was a preview. Like I did half the article as a LinkedIn article, and then it led people to click to this other link to download the rest of the thing. And the volume wasn't as big, but I mean, even just that ebook alone turned around like, I don't know, like a 50 grand customer within a month. Yep. So I would say that was literally just the fact that one person bought something out of that. I would say it was a success, and it helped platform my company into those kinds of conversations. Yeah. So it's like, you've got to think about what is your goal here? Is it immediate revenue? You can get that. Yeah. Is it to announce something? Sure. That also works as well. Is it to help get yourself, to quote Hamilton and Aaron Burr, is it to get yourself in the room where it happens? These are all viable like goals to have. So just based on what your goal is, like, it doesn't have to be a video or a music video. It could 100% be like written content that you create.
I love that first of all, I love that you broke down the sales feed thing, because I love watching your sales feed videos and how it has a bunch of people that are doing different lines in it. And I want to grow up to be one of those people. So, and that goes along with that benefit of being the stage, right? Like if you get people to partake in it that have a minor role in it, they're more likely to own it. They're more likely to share it. That's another engineered virality thing, engineered distribution push. The other thing I would say is to Julian, and correct me if I'm kind of on the right path here, right? Julie's a writer, right? So it's more natural for her to write something. And she's also a writer that thinks that the publish industry fucking sucks, right? And she is trying to help people publish their books. So the idea that Julie could write the manifesto of the self-publisher, or the manifesto, right? It wouldn't be Julie writing, hey, these are all the things I know, so much as like, if you can inspire something that in your writing gets everybody to like really, really connect this thing, that's like, I have to share this because this expresses how I feel too, or like, this is why I want to take down the system or whatever, right? Like that could be like a written approach, could be like a manifesto approach, or it could take a comedy route.
Or it could just be like, yeah, it could be that. It could be like it could be content that teaches or educates your audience. Like the specific one I'm referring to, it was the title of the article on LinkedIn was, here's why people don't want to meet with your startup, the X to Y effect. So now I've kind of stated up front, like exactly what it's going after, right? And then I've created a little bit of intrigue by coming up with this term called the X to Y effect. And then the content itself is literally about how to write better cold emails, and it specifically targets like how so many people, when they prospect, they over glamorize themselves, or they over glamorize like the results they get for customers, where you'll get that cold email and it'll be like, we got so and so company an 800% increase in bookings, within 2 months, right? So I talked about how that actually is backfiring on people. And then I had a whole reason why and everything, and then this led into like, I gave everything in that article, and then it was like, all right, so how do you actually work on this and get better at it? Download this to find out how. And that is what led. So the article on its own honestly stands up on its own. I didn't gate all the knowledge behind an email address, or behind an opt-in rather. I gave so much up front, and then said, all right, well, the part 2 of this is really figuring out what can you do now that you've been made aware of these truths. Well, let me show you, but here's a link to download this thing in exchange for your email address.
That's smart, man. I like that. So really define the problem, right? Like voice the pain from their standpoint so that they know that you understand them, with some advice and value. And then it's like, and oh, by the way, here's the way that I would do it too, right? It's kind of.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, it's just being able to teach your audience, right? I talk about this with founders a lot when we're building their pitch decks. And I talk a lot with sales leaders and CEOs when we're building their sales decks. And I think the same thing applies. So like Julie, in this case, I think the same thing would apply for like your written content if you're trying to pull off something like this. And I would say applied to what I just referenced with my own written content. The effect you would want to have if you're teaching them is where they say to themselves, you know, I never thought of it like that before. That's really interesting. I need to find out more about this. That is the absolute best impact. If someone has that like mental reaction or internal emotion from consuming your stuff, if you're going the education teaching route, and it's very effective because like really think about what you've done. You've exposed a new reality for them that they didn't realize they were operating in and existed. It's like, man, like, wait a second, this was under my nose this entire time and I never saw this? How? Holy crap, this Julie is so smart. I have got to keep seeing what's like what else she's doing, or I've got to follow up with the next thing that's in this piece of content.
Awesome. That's like the non-obvious content link that Chris Lockhead is talking about, right? Like the category pirates are talking about. And by the way, Julie, we're going to just produce just the piece of Raj saying you're super smart. And you can tell everybody that Raj said that. Take it all the context all the way you want. All right. I'm really glad we went down that path. We went down like a couple of new things that I hadn't thought to talk about. So this is why you are so valuable to this by showing up. Thank you for being here. Let's keep going down this Q&A. Ashish Latthi, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, asks, hey guys, if it's not too much, I want to ask something. So many so-called LinkedIn influencers are saying cold emails are dead. Some are even taking a screenshot of the messages and posting it. It really hurts to see some people are treating salespeople like scammers or spammers and also taking pride in it. Why don't they understand even the company they work for is nothing without sales? I'd like to know views from both of you. Note, I really admire and respect the kind of work you both guys are doing. What do you think, Raj? You want to take a shot at this? I remember you voraciously defending the cold email when we were having tea in Chicago, for the record.
Yeah, well, because someone who was in that group, I just wholeheartedly disagreed with them. Like, I don't know. It's kind of funny because like I've never seen that person since, but that I will forever remember that we disagreed on that point.
Yeah.
No, I mean, cold email is a huge part of my company, Startup Hype Man's sales strategy. It's not dead at all. I mean, the reality is it just requires being more effective. It's really easy to be bad at it. It's not that hard to be good at it. You just have to be more intentional about it. And I think where you see, like, you know, every now and then I will actually screenshot someone's email and I'll post it on LinkedIn and I'll redact any personal identifiers like company or name, but I'll use it to say, here's what didn't work for me about this email. Here's how I would improve it if I were this person. And to be honest, Ashish, I have a label in my Gmail called bad prospecting emails. And about 4 or 5 times a day, I add like 4 to 5 emails a day get put into that label. And it's just like this archive or repository that I may reference later on, but it's not to shame or anything like that. And I don't think anyone is necessarily like spamming. Everyone's just trying to do their job, but where it becomes, and I think anyone who's out there on LinkedIn who's intentionally shaming someone has their own issues they need to be dealing with, because I mean, I don't know. I think it says more about them than it does the other person. If you're not doing that to teach, if you're doing that to shame, then, you know, that's on you if that's the person that's doing that. But cold emails are definitely strong. It's just a matter of being more intentional about it. And I'll tell you, right? Like the things that make the bad prospecting emails folder, like, do you mind if I just go into it real quick? I don't need to screen share. I can just pull it up here at least on my side.
I think it's super valuable, man. And while you're pulling it up, Ashish, like I totally agree with Raj, right? Like it's, for me personally, I get really triggered when somebody is sending me something that I didn't ask for. So I'm liable to do that, but you got to take a step back and be like, man, people are doing their job. They're writing something. That being said, like Raj, I have the same reaction of just like, man, who taught this person how to write an email? Like, this is not, like, this doesn't add value to me. It doesn't really speak to me. It's kind of just like the copy paste formula without actually putting any work into the strategy of what draws the eye in. To me is the part that I'm just like, I've only been a marketer for I'm not really technically a marketer or a sales guy, and I know better than this. That I'm usually just like, but that's a me thing, right? Like that's just my own ego speaking and my own trigger mechanism. Raj, you want to go into give some value of what makes you good and bad?
Here, literally, I just got this email at 4:01 p.m. So 17 minutes ago during this podcast. So I just added the label to it. Exceeding ROAS goals, Rajiv, exclamation point. That's the subject line. Hey, Rajiv, when we partnered with the Chicago Bears to drive suite sales, They exceeded their target return on ad spend 53x over. You need to be sure your clients' ad dollars are being used wisely. That's why we keep a tight feedback loop and continuously optimize campaigns to maximize your clients' return on ad spend. Can we talk this week? I know you're busy, so we can schedule over a lunch or coffee break if it's more convenient. Here's my calendar. What can I possibly do with that email? There's so much I would change in that. But first off, like, why are you referencing the Chicago Bears to me? I have zero, and this is where I think people go wrong is they reference the wrong customers that are not categorically even in the same conversation. So I'm going to immediately say to myself, I'm not a $1 billion NFL team. I would never make use of this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then from there, it's like, it's very presumptive about the rest of it. And then real quick, this other one I got a couple of days ago, title of the email, DePaul University, or body. Hey, Rajiv, getting a Bachelor of Science from DePaul University puts you in the top 30% of graduates. That's impressive. My name is blank, and I can get you on sales calls with your dream clients. I promise you a sales call with 3 to 5 qualified prospects, and I won't charge you a dime. The catch, I just need a video testimonial showing you how I benefited you in return. That's it. Would you be open to a super quick call this or next week? This person's offering something for free, and I don't want it. What it be? The DePaul thing had nothing to do with the rest of the email, right? So you've just got to be like, I think tact is what's missing because, and to be honest, so much of it is a result of piss poor performance metrics that salespeople are being graded on. And I think there needs to be a whole separate conversation around quality metrics instead of just quantity metrics.
Yep. Yeah, man. I love your sales feed stuff when you're breaking down cold emails, right? So Brian, if you can, what's a good YouTube video? I feel like you've recently done something breaking down these cold emails.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, I co-host. So there's a sales media network called Sales Feed. And for Sales Feed, I co-host a weekly talk show called Full Funnel, where we just like break down different topics in sales in about less than 10 minutes every week. So we recently did an episode where I think we just unpacked like 3 different cold emails, like successful and unsuccessful. So Ashish, if you want to go check that out, just literally search Sales Feed on YouTube, and then you'll see Full Funnel as a playlist. And it'll be one of the recent videos there.
Cool. Brian, see if you can find that. All right. For me, I recognize something that you discovered there. That's like when you give a compliment and then it doesn't have anything to do with the rest of it, it just comes across fake, right? Like, it's just like, all right, dude, whatever. You just said I went to DePaul, and by the way, buy my thing. Like, that doesn't really work. So cool, man. I want to crank through some of these. I know that you got to go right on time to go teach your yoga class. And then we're going to have the B2B Community Builder Show video premiere of Carl. All right, cool. So Bob has a really good question I wanted to get to. He says, audience, if the solution is to help the SDR, but they're not the buyer, their sales manager or marketing manager is the buyer, should you target the beneficiary, SDR, or the decision maker?
Bob, great question. Both can work. It's just a matter of what you decide, the path you want to go. Because I'll tell you, with the Carl video, that's embodying the life of the SDR. My company has no product to sell to the SDR directly. But what did all those SDRs do? They shared it with their sales manager, right? Or they shared it with their CEO. And that's what got us meetings then with CEOs, because what's interesting, right, is like as part of a follow-up strategy, I was able to either get introductions directly to those decision makers because the SDR felt such a connection to that content, or I was able to just look up who was the decision maker at that company and be like, hey, all of these people at your company have already interacted with this thing. Have you seen it yet? And then, from there, start to pivot towards maybe we should talk because it looks like it's resonating with your team so well. So it sounds like maybe there's some things that they could work on.
Rush, is there anything to the idea that what you talked about, right? Like you were already posting content on LinkedIn so that when you flex this muscle and you get all these eyeballs, people are going to just be like, who is this dude and what does he do? And I like him and I want to work with him. So whenever something comes up in a meeting, I'm going to be like, oh, I know a pitch artist. I know a guy that does this kind of thing. Is there something to the idea that you want to do this and then continue to be active on the social platform anyways, and it's a long tail effect?
Yeah, you want to be. I mean, if your goal is lead generation, I'll say 2 things. One, it's fine, but don't let that get in the way of creating the content. Like, I think you can really shoot yourself in the foot if you're worried about like, oh, how do I make sure this generates X number of leads? Because then you'll get worried that you're not talking about the product enough, but the fact that you don't talk about it is a good thing. And then if you start talking about it more, the content suffers. But if you do want to generate leads out of this kind of stuff, I do recommend being very intentional, not just on the distribution, but on the follow-up afterwards. So I'll tell you the number of people who I looked at and I sent them voice messages in their LinkedIn DMs being like, thanks for watching this. Really glad it resonated. And then I was able to like flip it and say, now, in the spirit of Carl, I got to follow up on this opportunity. So if you weren't aware, just so you know, like we work with companies who are dealing with this, with insert this thing. Here's how we work with them. Would love to talk to you if you're open to it. And there's already such a feeling of connection because of the content. And I knock on wood as I say this, but it's kind of weird because it's almost like they're almost honored to meet with you. Yeah. Right. So you kind of like change the power dynamic, if you will. And I don't say that in like, I hope that didn't come off in like a seedy or like insidious way. It's just that because you've been able to do something first with the content that brought so much to their day, they're happy to have that meeting with you and they already kind of inherently understand how you could help them.
Man, that's so good, right? Two things. Have you ever heard of the term propinquity?
No.
So
teach me.
There's a term called propinquity that's just like the familiarity you have with something, right? So like if they've seen your video and they were entertained and impressed by it, they are familiar with you to a certain extent. And therefore, next time that you talk to them, your relationship has evolved with that person, even though you haven't done any work, right? So we build this into our relationship flywheel bootcamp and the way that we produce shows and how we repurpose content in the idea that before I take a call, right? Like in my Calendly link, I don't know if you ever registered through it, but when somebody's booking a call with me on Calendly, there is a field that says, hey, have you listened to my like 9-minute storytelling rap about my origin story? If
Nice.
so, check it out here, right? Like
Nice.
the idea that once you create one of these pieces and before you take a call with anybody or an email with somebody, you can like, if I were you, I would have Carl on my email signature. Have you seen the Carl video? Right? Like
I think it is.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Let's see. Oh, no, Fresh Prince of Sasses. But my TED Talk is in my email signature.
No big deal.
And to your point, my Calendly thing, the auto email they get the day before the meet, like the 24-hour reminder email is hey, and if you get a chance, watch my TED Talk. I think you might like it. And the TED Talk is literally, the content is nothing that has to do with what we sell, but it's an interesting topic. And I think it gives people a little bit more familiarity and a little, some credibility while I'm at it.
A TEDx talk is a content lightning strike all into its own. That's why people pay so much to be coached to land a TEDx stage.
Yeah.
Because when you have a TEDx talk, boom, automatic credibility and automatic like validation, right? So that's a content strike onto its own. I don't want to go too late so that you don't get to go to your yoga class, Raj.
I'm gonna give you until 40 after, because I knew I was gonna enjoy this a lot, and I brought my bag with me so I don't got to go home in between, so I can hang on for a couple extra minutes.
Amazing, dude. Amazing. Okay. So let's talk about that, right? So you talked about the follow-up mechanism, right? And we talked about, I'll let you decide, man. Do you think there's more value in talking about follow-up mechanisms and what you did after the fact, or maybe talking about what are other versions of content lightning strikes that people can think of?
Why don't I try and touch on both? I also want to hit Dawn's question about the copyright stuff.
Perfect.
So let me start with the follow-up mechanism. This and Ashish, kind of to your question earlier, right? Like I was able to generate like revenue success out of these things because I was intentional about the follow-up. So there was a whole follow-up email campaign, follow-up LinkedIn campaign, right? Like I did these things afterwards to capitalize on that. Fresh Prince of Sass years ago. Yeah. Did I get some inbound interest? Sure. But I also made sure that I got back in front of people, because I hold a belief it should never be my expectation that someone else knows they should reach out to me, because people are just busy, right? I can produce the best content. I can get 6.5 minutes. They can watch it twice, right? I can get 13 minutes of their time straight, but I still have to assume that after that 13 minutes is up, they've got 15 unread emails in their inbox that they're trying to get through, plus 5 meetings the rest of the day. which is why I'm always very intentional about that follow-up strategy and making sure I can use, the content almost like helps platform me into a follow-up conversation with those people who engage with it. Other thing that I wanted to hit on was Dawn's question about the copyright infringement. Right now, LinkedIn hasn't figured this stuff out. They may at some point, but it hasn't been an issue yet. And my thought is always, I would be honored if Interscope Records sent me a cease and desist. I would probably frame it and put it on my wall. But it's also what I believe is probably the base sort of like that's like what the legal pushback would be, like a cease and desist and not an automatic lawsuit or anything like that. Now, I'm not a lawyer. That's not my legal advice or anything, but that's just my personal belief. So I have never worried about the copyright infringement.
Accomplish your work goals faster.
Now, if I were doing it on Facebook, I think it would probably be pulled down pretty quickly. And then the other thing, Pablo, was about other types of content.
Yeah.
I mean, again, it's like play to your advantages.
Yeah. Let's break down what you just said a second, right? Like I like to repeat on stuff that has value for the audience. First of all, I think Ryan just found the YouTube video of you on Sales Feed. She's sharing it in the chat for the cold emails, so everybody gets to see it. The follow-up piece, never assume that somebody is going to follow up with you. The idea that you got to be empathetic to the fact that everybody's busy, I think is an ongoing theme of what you're talking about, whether it is the cold email, whether it is the content. You gotta see the world through your client's eyes, right? Like the more that you're seeing the world through your client's eyes and acting accordingly and not assuming that they see it through your eyes, I think is an ongoing theme of kind of like all your strategies, which I want to highlight. Second, I think there is opportunity to the idea that LinkedIn doesn't yet regulate trademark. Like YouTube will take it down like this.
Yeah.
Facebook will
Although, you know what? I think it might fit under like parody law, maybe, because I believe it does exist as it does. Yeah, Carl exists as a YouTube link and hasn't been taken down.
Really interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. We've had YouTube hit us up on like, hey, is this thing trademarked or not, on like things that we produce. Luckily, we use the services that we pay for music that we license. So I know that it's out there, but parody law, I guess that works. So that's really, really interesting. All right, cool. So yeah, opportunity on LinkedIn, the fact that they haven't figured this out, and be like, never let a good crisis go to waste, right? Like if like Def Jam Records like reaches out to you, you can be like, the Raj versus Def Jam and make a whole bunch of content out of it that adds validation and can create that whole hype, and you can cease and desist all you want. Not that we're attorneys.
And there have been two really good pop culture examples of that. In the 80s, when NWA was on the rise, the FBI sent them a letter saying you have to stop playing F the Police. And then what did they do? They like read that letter out loud at a concert.
That's right.
For any fans of pro wrestling in the late 90s, D-Generation X, they were doing a lot, like 1997 was doing a lot of like controversial stuff on air and, using some curse words. And USA Network, where the show was being aired on, sent WWE a letter saying you cannot use these words on air. You cannot use these suggested themes. What did D-Generation X do? The next episode of Monday Night Raw, they did a fake, like, and this is when Bill Clinton was president in the US. They did a fake like podium setup as if they were Bill Clinton at the podium, and they read like a State of the Union address, but they literally just read the letter to USA Network wrote to them. And it was like, they said all the exact curse words that were in the letter, and then WWE just bleeped them out as they were saying it. So you knew exactly what they were saying, but it was bleeped out. And that made it, it blew up even more, to where then USA Network came back and were like, okay, we see you got even higher ratings. So here's our revised format of this. Just make it between 9 and 10 o'clock and not 8 and 9 o'clock.
Yeah, that's awesome. That actually adds thunder to the lightning, right?
Yes.
Like, don't forget about my boys 2 Live Crew, who, when they got banned, they made the title of their album Banned in America.
Yeah,
right? Like,
exactly.
You can always leverage it. There's examples of this everywhere. All right, man, let's talk other forms of content that could be lightning strikes. We've said TED Talks, we've said manifestos, we've said parody songs. Anything else that you're seeing? I'm starting to see like something that I'm hot on is if you can take references from like really well-performing pop culture advertising things and then redo it to yourself, right? Like the most interesting man in the world. I saw Todd, the guy from Refine Labs, he's starting to do like the worst marketer in the world on TikTok. It's brilliant, right? So like anything else that you're seeing out there, opportunities for content like
I think that's an example of like drafting off of already established success. And I think that's a great way to go about it. I guess I'm struggling to think of like other specific executions, but I mean, it's literally, it's like written word, video, audio,
Yep.
or like memes, right? Those are the ways you can go about it. And I think as well, like events are a thing, but look at, can you establish partnerships that are going to all push people towards one property in a given moment? Like right now, I'm working with Pablo and Be the Stage to produce a hip hop album specifically dedicated to startups. And it's not a parody album. It's a legit album. It's a legit mixtape. And when this thing is done, you are fooling yourself if you think I'm just going to put it on Spotify and hope people find it. No, like I have been establishing partnerships for other things over the last 3 years. And I'm going to come back to all these other partners well in advance and say, hey, I've got this thing coming up. Do you want to be in on the release of it? And then I'm going to have all these incubators and accelerators and startup communities around the world, all pushing out to their communities on the same day to go to this Spotify link or whatever, whatever the link is, right? Like I'm going to push them to one specific place. So it's not just contained to my reach, but I can amplify the reach across all these communities who I know it's going to resonate with.
Yeah. I'm so glad you brought up the mixtape, dude. I didn't want to do it without you saying it, but now that we're talking about it, do you want to give a little bit of teaser of the mixtape that we're working on? Like, I'm so pumped for this.
So, all right. So let me give you that first. So we got, it's going to be, I don't know, maybe 5, 6, maybe 7 songs. Still trying to come up with the album title.
Yeah.
So I don't have that yet. So right now the project name is just Startup Mixtape. But we just finished a song last week called, for those of you who are Tupac fans, you remember he had a song called I Get Around back in the early 90s. We titled this song I Get Around with a space between and round, meaning like I just like raised around a capital.
Yeah.
And it's a banger of a track, but the opening of it is, the beat comes in and I go, wipe the dust off my pitch deck. This is my commitment to the day I'm seeing big checks, a big flex. I am showing up in rich threads so that when you see me, you are never going to hit next. I'm in step, give a fuck about the competition on another planet made up of another composition. It's a hot position with a view that you don't see. Are we the best, motherfucker? We the only. You don't own me like every other crony. Specialist geneticist with money couldn't clone me. And second guessing every metric is baloney. Counting up the doubters who gonna come around as homies. Word to Dre, thinking I'ma let my dough freeze, coming for the Gouda and the cheddar, give me both cheese. Out of stealth, no more keep it on the low key, 24/8 like I resurrected Kobe.
Let's go, dude. That was awesome. Awesome. Raj, I think right there we can drop the mic and finish this, man. Before we do, is there anything I didn't ask you about that you want to talk about? Anything that you want to promote, anywhere you want to send people right now?
Connect with me personally on LinkedIn. You've got my info here. It's probably been in the chat already. I got the creator profile. So if you want to like follow me, sure. But if you want to like actually connect, you got to hit the drop down and then it'll say connect with me. And then, check us out, startuphypeman.com, doing a lot with the startup community around pitch development. We're creating music videos for companies as well. So if that's something you're interested in, of course, but I think what I didn't really share today was our overall philosophy and point of view as a company, and it did show up in the lyrics though. So I'll leave you with this. Don't ever care about being the best. Instead, strive to be the only.
Love that, buddy. I have officially finished the Facebook live stream. We're about to premiere the B2B Community Builder Show premiere of Carl. Raj, I'm gonna let you get to your yoga class, man. If anybody out there didn't figure it out, this is a guy that teaches yoga, loves pro wrestling, raps, is an entrepreneur, just a fascinating
and a MMA ring announcer, as I just did this past weekend.
And an MMA ring announcer. I love that, man. I'm just really grateful, man. So your relationship is one of these like perfect highlights of why I love the internet, man. Like the idea that somebody can create this like super cool creative thing that speaks to me, that I can then reach out to. We can then grab tea in Chicago. And then like 6 months later, we're working on a mixtape together. Is this like idea of limitlessness in business and entrepreneurship that really, really inspires me, man. And I love the fact that we're getting to work together. And I really, really appreciate you doing this, buddy. I'm really pumped for our friendship, man. Thank you so much.
Appreciate you. Thank you for the platform, for the stage.